Thank you.
Good morning.
Oh, yeah. Scott, we'll share with you our Planet DDS Sales Summit playlist as well. I've got feedback. I actually searched for Austin artists to play you in, but that's going to be too complicated, so I'm not going to do that. You're not originally from there, are you?
No, I'm from Chico, California, originally.
You're from California.
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
I did not hear that.
Go State's a party school, apparently.
Yeah, #1 party school in the nation. Claim to fame of the town.
All right, Mike, are we ready to get started?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, guys. So I'm super thrilled to introduce Scott today. I met him about 5 years ago in San Francisco at a company sales kickoff, a similar event to this. And at the time, I was pretty new as far as people management, and the other folks that in the group were also newer managers. So it was interesting to hear Scott speak, and so his advice made an immediate impact on my leadership style and how I've approached management, and it's stuck with me over the years. Additionally, Scott's LinkedIn feed is he's my favorite guy on LinkedIn. There's a lot of people that post stuff, and sometimes I get tired of their posts. But what every single post is super relevant. He's got the ability to flawlessly cut through the noise, AKA no bullshit. He gives concise, powerful, relevant advice. And how does he do it? I mean, he's got a ton of experience. So I think one of the toughest things you can do is enter an organization at the leadership level. And Scott has done that repeatedly. He kind of reminds me of a real estate developer that flips houses. Instead of houses, he flips sales teams.
I like that.
I thought about that this morning. You're welcome.
I like that analogy. Yeah.
All right, so let me read off his official credentials, guys. He was published 3 times. In fact, yesterday in your swag bag, you received, thank you, Scott, one of his books, Addicted to the Process. He's also published From Rep to Manager and More Than a Number. He's CEO and founder of his own consulting firm. He's been a sales leader 6 times. And oh, by the way, he's founded 2 other companies. That makes me feel really lazy. Thanks, Scott. It's all about me. For the Arizonans in the room, Scott earned his master's degree from ASU. Go Sun Devils. Yes. All right, so today Scott will lead an interactive discussion that focuses on self-reliance in lead generation. How do we crack the code to self-sourcing and outbounding? And this will be interactive. Scott can see you guys right now. Hey, Scott. The microphone is up here. So for questions and discussions, I'm going to ask you guys to help me make sure that Scott can hear us and then jump up here as we go along. All right, well, Scott, take it away. Let me actually get this PowerPoint down so everyone can see you full screen.
Sure. Thanks for the all the kind words and the introduction. You have a standing job offer as my publicist now after all of that. So thank you very much. Mic check. You can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So Chris talked a little bit about my background. I took a long and winding road to get into sales. So I kind of want to start there because I think it's a important kind of message for everybody to hear. You heard me talk a little bit earlier. I grew up in a town called Chico, California, famous only for Sierra Nevada Brewing Company and Chico State University, small town. Played 4 sports there in high school, went on to play 2 sports in college in the Bay Area, and played professional soccer in Ireland and in Arizona, as well as San Francisco for a little while. Got my master's degree at Arizona State after getting an undergraduate degree in psychology and religion, of all things. And then when I came home after my first year of graduate school, I got very, very sick. I was 22, not quite 23 at the time. Thought I was bulletproof, was, making my way through school, still playing professionally and getting paid to play sports and coach and everything like that. But really, I had no fucking clue what I wanted to do with my life. Grad school was like delaying reality for me because I didn't want to have a job yet. I didn't want to go work. So I get really sick. I proceeded to spend the next 4 years in the hospital fighting for my life. Multiple different hospitals, Mayo Clinic in Arizona, UCSF in San Francisco, Enloe Hospital in Chico. People couldn't figure out what was going on, what was wrong. I'm 6'2". I weighed about 195 pounds when I was playing. Pretty strong, pretty big. I lost 55 pounds in 6 weeks and dropped down to 145 pounds. I had organ failure from the massive stress on my body. Turned out I had a couple autoimmune diseases. Over time, they started throwing more and more medicine at me, just, throwing shit at the wall to find out what would stick. None of it would work. It would all cause new and unpleasant problems and new challenges and whatnot. And then I found out I had colon cancer along the way, on top of ulcerative colitis. If you know what that is, it's similar to Crohn's disease, GI trouble. So all of my issues are in my gut. Then I started to get scar tissue and total blockages. And so I had to have a series of 9 surgeries. 4 of them were major, life-threatening, life-saving abdominal surgeries. Twice it went bad, and I had to have emergency surgery to fix what had sprung a leak in there. Not to get too graphic, but pretty brutal stuff. And it took over 4 years for me to kind of get through all that and survive it. And there's a little thing called pain medicine that they give you when you have these kind of challenges. What they don't tell you, as I'm sure some of you unfortunately can relate, what they don't tell you is that Oxycontin and Dilaudid and liquid morphine, when you drink it all day for 4 years, you end up as an opioid addict. So after I was healthy, I was a junkie, basically, and I had to kick off of pain meds, which is a whole nother, challenge in and of itself. So here I am. I'm finally healthy-ish. I'm 27 years old. My body is still got a long ways to go to recover, but I'm 27 years old, and I've never had a job in my life that didn't involve getting paid to play sports or coach youth sports. And I had no idea what to do with myself. And my psychology degree I felt was irrelevant, like I'd forgotten everything. My master's degree was in learning and instructional technology. I don't even remember what it was, to be honest with you, through everything that I've been through. So I had a friend who said, well, maybe you should try sales. Like you can get a sales job, with no experience at all. And I was always, a pretty big introvert, and I didn't consider myself a salesperson whatsoever. But what I was super competitive and extremely resilient, having been through what I've been through. And, I don't think that you go through some of the challenges like I went through in life and come out of it with the same perspective. And what I had was an extreme sense of urgency and an extreme sense of appreciation and gratitude for every single opportunity that I might be given. And I intended not to squander any of them. So I found a startup company in the Bay Area that I went and interviewed for. Entry-level sales job, inside sales. This is 2004, I think, for the timeline. And, they asked me in the interview, like, why the hell should we hire you? You've never done sales before, none of this stuff. And I told him, yeah, I've never done any of that, never done sales, don't know if I'll be any good. But what I do know is that nobody will be more grateful to be in this room than me. And somebody's going to give me a shot and an opportunity, and that person's not going to regret it. And this guy had San Francisco 49ers pictures on his wall. And so I knew he was like sports guy. And I said, you're aware of like free agency and the draft and all this kind of stuff, right? He said, oh yeah, of course. I said, well, I'm the best undrafted free agent that you're ever going to find. And somebody's going to give me a shot, and I hope it's you. And he bought it, thankfully for me. And that's kind of how I got my start in sales. And what I learned real quickly in selling, and this was long before I didn't even have a CRM, I didn't have a list, I didn't even have a headset. I had to hold the phone like this on my shoulder. That's how long ago this was. I see a couple of older guys in the back nodding their head, like they can relate maybe a little bit. So as I started selling, I started realizing that there was a little bit of a process here that nobody was teaching me, but I was learning on my own. This was not a place that gave you training. I showed up on the first day and learned a little bit about the product and the company during the morning. And in the afternoon, they told me to hit the phones. And I was absolutely fucking terrified, and after the first day, I was like, I got to quit this job. I have no idea how I'm going to do this. I am definitely not a salesperson. And my wife kind of gave me a punch to the gut and said, well, if you don't do this, what are you going to do? And I went, I don't have a good answer for that. So I better figure this out. So I started selling, but the only way that I could understand at all and relate to what I was doing, having no training and no resources, was mirroring what I was doing to the recovery process. And that's, kind of talked about in my book, Addicted to the Process. And it took me, 13 years later before I kind of canonized it and put it in text form and everything. But what I realized was that nobody cared about me or my product or my company at all. And what I heard everybody else doing around me was saying, hi, this is Scott from reply.com. How are you? Cool. Well, we do lead generation for automotive and real estate. And I was like, this makes no sense. Nobody gives a shit because they don't think that I'm relevant and they don't think it has anything to do with them whatsoever. And that's the same way that you have to treat somebody with addiction. You don't just walk up to somebody and say, hey, Scott, I got this killer rehab facility called Passages out in Malibu. You ready to go? Addict, me, would be like, get the fuck out of here. I don't have a problem. What are you talking about? So my whole job, I felt like in starting my sales process was, I need to get this person to admit to me that they have a problem. That's how I entered every sales call. It wasn't enough for me to tell you that you had a problem. Like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Dentist, like you probably have a challenge, communicating and engaging your clientele. It's not good enough to just tell somebody. They get defensive. What I had to do was I would ask questions leading questions on purpose, so I knew where I was taking them. I'd ask these questions where they would eventually be like, yeah, that's a challenge for us. Now they admit that they have a problem. But is that enough to get somebody to change? Is that enough to get an addict to change? No. I'm sure we all are aware of or have had, direct relationship with people who are functioning addicts or alcoholics. They know they have a problem, but it doesn't mean enough yet. There's not enough on the line yet. So what comes next? What comes next is educating somebody on why they should care about fixing this particular problem. So the dental office admits to me that they have a problem or a challenge, a pain point. Now my job is to make them understand why they should care. So this is not a pitch at all. This is just like me teaching. This is me educating you on why people in your industry should care to fix this problem. This is why other people do it. This is why you might want to think about it. So that's step 2, is just building value. So I find pain. That's the first thing. I build value. That's the second thing. Is that enough? No. The thing that's missing is, why should I take action right now? The thing that's missing is urgency. There's a lot of people that I talked to in recovery and whatnot that have, they knew they had a problem. They understood the benefits of changing their behavior, and it still wasn't enough. It's not enough until you're about to lose your job. You're about to lose your marriage. You're about to lose your kids. You're about to lose your health. You're about to lose your life. That's a rock bottom kind of moment, right? So we have to talk about urgency. We have to create and unearth and get them to recognize this is not a paper cut. This is a severed limb that they need to do something about straight away. So I'm finding pain. I'm building value. I'm creating urgency. And then and only then is somebody going to be open to what we do, our solution, rehab. And as I went about my phone calls in the early days, I started recognizing and realizing, shit, this kind of process actually works. So I started just doing it over and over and over, at volume, at scale. I got real good as an individual contributor. I broke records, real quick. 7 months later, they made me a sales manager. I started teaching a team of 15 people how to do what was working for me. Then I started teaching the other teams in the office. Before I knew it, I'd had a year of total job experience. And I was overseeing 2 offices, one in Scottsdale and one in Walnut Creek, California. And I had 70 people reporting to me before I even knew what happened. That's a lot of people for somebody with 1 year of business experience, 7 months of sales experience, and like 5-6 months of sales management experience. Fortunately, I had a good team around me, and I had been a leader and a motivator in sports and in my life. And, I'm very open and honest about the things that I've been through. And, let's be honest, a lot of people end up in sales because they didn't know what else to do or what, right? Congrats on your liberal arts undergrad degree. It means fuck all. All it did was get you $100,000 of debt, right? And that's how we end up in sales. So a lot of people relate to that. And a lot of people end up in sales who are, current or former or at least half degenerates. So I think people can relate to some of my story a little bit. So I'm honest and transparent about these things and apply stuff I knew from sports and my health issues and whatnot. And after 2.5 years at that company and a 9-figure plus, acquisition situation, I left because I asked them what I had to do to become a VP of sales. And they said, well, you've done amazing for us, but you don't have enough experience. Like, you don't have an executive seat at the table here, and we don't imagine one. And so I quit. I didn't have any other job lined up whatsoever. I just was like, well, my time has expired here. I hit the, proverbial glass ceiling, if you will. And so I'm not really going to hang out and waste any more of my days. This goes back to my mentality of like, if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, if I'm not growing, if I'm not progressing, if I don't have opportunity in front of me, I'm not spending a moment of my time in that kind of environment, in that kind of situation. I know what it's like to have everything ripped out from underneath you. And so I don't know that tomorrow is guaranteed or the next year or whatever. I got to move. I got to do this quick. Right. So I quit. And, thus begins the saga that Christina talked about of, me flipping sales orgs, if you will. So I always spend about 2.5 to 3 years when I was an operator, building and scaling sales teams. So 5 times, 6 if you count the first one, where I wasn't a VP, but I still was basically leading the sales motion after 7 months or so. I take companies who have no revenue. They just have an idea, and a good product. I go in, I figure out how to sell it. I hire a couple people, prove that I can teach it, and then we scale it. And so 5 times after the first one, I took companies from 0 to 25 million in ARR, and that became my niche and my sweet spot. And being able to tell that story of like, hey, I'm the guy that gets you off the ground. I go from 0 to 25 million. It's going to take 2 to 3 years. And having founders be able to bank on that, is really beneficial to my career. A lot of people who lead sales teams, and Michael can maybe attest to this, after a certain period of time, people don't necessarily like to go back to the very beginning anymore. A lot of VPs of sales like to evolve their career and become a VP of spreadsheets and look at Excel and look at Salesforce reports all day long. And that's just not me. I wanted to get into the mud and dig ditches and get on the phone and figure this shit out and have big milestones, right? I'm not a corporate person, as you can tell. I look like a homeless person. I dress like I did in high school. I am built for being in the early stage of startups and figuring things out. And that's what I love doing. And after a period of time and some successes, I started picking up consulting gigs and starting to have other startups referred into me, like, how do you do this? What's the playbook? What's the process? And that kind of led to me, writing my first book, Addicted to the Process. Then I started a company called Surf and Sales, which is a sales and leadership conference down in Costa Rica. I'm a big surfer. I got into surfing after my illness when I was not able to play soccer or tennis anymore. So I started surfing, became a big passion of mine. And so a couple times a year, I take like 20 people down to Costa Rica and teach people how to surf and go through sales and leadership training. And that spun out a podcast. Podcast will do 150,000 downloads. It's about 1.5 years old. We've recorded 250 episodes already. My co-host, Richard Harris, and I. We have big fancy sponsors like Salesforce and Gong and Vidyard and companies like that. During the pandemic, I created a company called Thursday Night Sales. It's the world's largest virtual sales happy hour. We've had 14,000 people in the last year plus come to our virtual sales happy hours just like this. And people pop on and have cocktails and ask us questions, and we give advice and have some laughs and things like that. And, I've kind of just continued to stay as active and involved as possible with primarily early stage companies and help them figure out, how to build an outbound and an inbound sales motion. And super passionate about helping people take the next step in their career. And that led me to write this book called From Rep to Manager with my co-author, Ryan Walker. Came out in January. Christina and Michael, if you remind me, I'll email everybody a copy of that, and everybody can have that on top of the book that you already got. This From Rep to Manager is an ebook only. And then kind of completing the trilogy, I just wrote about the life and times of a VP of sales. And that's my new book called More Than a Number. It's kind of like a modern VP of sales playbook, if you will. And so that's a little bit about me and my background and kind of where my sales game started, my sales philosophy. And I'm excited to be here and chat with you all. I just wanted to give you some context of who the hell you're talking to and maybe why. And I'm an open book, so I answer any and all questions that people might have about any subject.
Okay, who's first? Who's got a question?
Was it just software that you focus on?
question was it software, just software that you focus on?
I wouldn't say it's just software, but that's a primary industry, if you will, that I've spent the majority of my career in. A lot of SaaS, a lot of vertical specific SaaS, but also a lot of services kind of businesses. And probably 70% of my career is selling to SMBs, small local businesses, and 30% is more mid-market and low-end enterprise. So I've sold to dentists and lawyers and insurance agents and mortgage brokers and real estate agents and, you name it. And there's a few companies that I work with that are in like marketplaces and direct to consumer, actual physical goods. But yeah, primarily software.
What else? You know what I'm going to ask. Talk to us about a repeatable process. Or you know what, actually, I guess this is a better question. How do you get started with just generating your own leads as a BDR or an account exec or director of sales? Like, how do you spin up that program?
Yeah, well, the first thing you have to do is you have to get really good at identifying your ideal customer profile. So you should know, or at least have a thesis over what's the right type of customer for us. So I'm going to use dentists as an example, and I'll probably butcher like what is your actual ideal customer profile, but hopefully you understand where I'm going with it. You might find, for example, that your best customers have been in business for a long time, or you might find that they're newer into the industry, younger practitioners who are maybe more open to trying something new. You might find that it's a group rather than individuals. You might find that it's somebody who has multiple locations versus a single location. You might find that's a particular geography. Just thinking through all of these different kind of check boxes on what's the right type of customer for us and why. That's where I start. That's the very first thing that I do. From there, I move to like, who are the different people that are going to be involved in this purchasing process? Is it the office manager alone? Is it the office manager and the dentist or the head of the office? Is it both of them? Is there some sort of marketing group that they work with that I have to talk to? So each of these folks is going to be interested in you and your service or product for a different reason. And so you've got to tailor that message based on who you're talking to, right? So the office manager might care primarily about the day-to-day and how we're going to make their job easier and better. But that person who owns that office might care a lot more about the bottom line and the ROI. So those conversations would be different. So I go from ICP to buyer persona and understanding who the influencers are versus who's the actual decision maker. That's where I start. And then I use whatever tool I have access to. So if my company has provided me, tools and lists, I use that. If I have to get on LinkedIn and search for the right people, I do that. Back when I started selling, there was no LinkedIn, there was no tools. So, I was selling lead generation services for real estate agents in 2004. So I would just go to realtor.com or kellerwilliams.com or Coldwell Banker or whatever, and punch in my territory, which was Sacramento, greater Sacramento, California area, and the greater Indianapolis area. Those were my two territories. And so I just search and I'd pull information out, I'd drop it in a spreadsheet and created my own list, and then I'd hammer through the list. So that's how I would get started in terms of finding who am I gonna call. To answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, that was great. I'm actually making some notes here on the whiteboard as well. I guess one other person. Okay, John, go ahead. Oh, actually, do you mind coming up here?
Sure.
Good. This is one of the guys who nodded his head when I talked about having to make phone calls like this.
Yes, I definitely remember those days. Well, where you just talked about kind of leads to the question I was gonna ask. So you mentioned, you've got to get them to admit they have a problem. How did you get from the gatekeeper, because I can just picture, ourselves as well, calling individual doctors. I call on enterprises myself, so leads are mostly coming in, or I'm finding them through my network that I've known, been in the industry for 15 years. But even for the solos where they're calling and getting that office manager, how are you getting that conversation past the gatekeeper where it's typically, 4 or 5 interactions to get to have that discussion, to ask the questions and get them to admit that they are an addict?
Yeah, I just start treating them like a partner of mine. And I try to create a dynamic where that office manager or secretary or gatekeeper, where the dynamic becomes, it's me and you. How do we figure out how to communicate that there's this challenge going on over there and that it's worth trying to fix? How do we communicate that to whoever's the decision maker, whoever's the owner over there? So I don't approach it as like, I need to get past the gatekeeper. I approach it as, I got to turn this gatekeeper into my best friend. I got to make them feel like I understand and I hear them when they talk about their problems and challenges. So I'm not asking them about the dentists or the dental groups, like specific challenges, right? So if I can't get to the decision maker straight away, I'm asking them about their role and their job. And you'll have to forgive me because I don't know enough about what your product does, but I'm going to be asking questions like, what are some of the things that are a mess for you personally over there? Like, is your workflow a pain in the neck? Do you have to rekey information all over the place into this software? Holy shit, you're using software from 1995? That must be a pain in the neck, right? And just get them talking, right? Like, what would make your job easier? What would make your job smoother, faster, and engaging around that, okay? And then if they answer any or all of those questions, those are my pain points. And now they've admitted to me that they have a problem. And so now I go through my process with that gatekeeper. So I'm making sure they understand why they should care about fixing these things, how it'll make their life better, what's at risk by them not doing anything. I use social proof like crazy. I was talking to a dental office in Chico, California the other day. I was talking to this group in Austin the other day. This is how they think about that. So I let them know that their competition basically is out there solving these same problems, right? I love to ask questions, when they tell me, oh, everything's fine, we're all good. My favorite question there is, oh, are you the number one dental office in Austin? I think I got some feedback there, but I asked them, like, are you the number one office in the area? And they're always like, no. I'm like, well, what do you think those people are doing that you're not? Do you think it's possible that they're taking advantage of some of this stuff right here and maximizing it? And that's an area of opportunity for you. If you ask it the right way with the right tone, you're going to get, well, yeah, that's definitely possible. They might be doing that. So now I'm educating them, right? And so I start talking about start creating urgency there. And then we talk about our solution. So I'm basically spending time turning them into an ally and a champion and an influencer on the decision. And then it leads me to a place where I'm like, okay, we're on the same team now. You and I both understand we have this problem. We both want to fix this. What's the best way for us to approach the group or the decision maker, the main dentist, right? The association, whoever you're selling to. So that's my approach. I hope I answered your question okay.
Yeah, thanks, John.
That was great. Who's next? Come up here. Today is Johnson's second time using the microphone, Scott. So big round of applause, Johnson.
Hi, Scott.
Hi there.
So I am the BDR team lead with the Demicon side of things at BDS. And my question to you is, what do you think the most important thing is to keep your team motivated in making outbound calls?
Well, I think it is a very personal and individual answer. And what I mean by that is you have to get to know every single person on your team and find out what makes them tick and why they're here. And it's going to be different. You know, somebody might be there and strictly for the money. Somebody might be there trying to go from BDR to AE. Somebody might have aspirations of being an entrepreneur and starting their own company. Somebody might be trying to pay down school debt. Somebody might be trying to use this as a stepping stone into marketing. So I just have conversations and spend time with my people so I understand what matters to them. So I would know, well, you're trying to buy a new car, and I'd work with you on goals and how to get there. I'd know so-and-so is trying to buy a new house in Tempe, so I'd work with them on that. And that's what it's about. And then I transition from knowing them and knowing what makes them tick to my sole job is to help people on my team get what they want and get to wherever it is they want to go next. So my job is to remove blockers and impediments from their way, any and all obstacles. So the sentence that I would say to my team all the time is, what do you need from me today? What can I do for you? What's in your way? What's holding you back? And then they tell me, and I'm like, I'll get back to you. I got to go fix these things. So that's the way that I've managed for almost 20 years now. It requires you to be very giving of your time and your energy. It flies a little bit in the face of the dashboard managers who are like, well, you need to make 150 fucking calls a day, and that's all that matters is these metrics. Like, yeah, that stuff matters, but nobody cares about all that. They're not going to go to war for you if they don't think you're going to war for them. So I really can't stress enough. Like my people have to end up believing that I will move heaven and earth in order to help them be successful. That includes eventually having them potentially graduate and leave my company. That's a win for me. If you're a BDR and you progress to AE, and we have no sales manager spots, and you get a sales manager offer and it's a $50,000 raise like that I can't match, good on you. I did what I need to do. And I'm proud of that. So I don't hold people back, So again, I'm trying to help you get to wherever it is you want to go next. And I've got to remove any and all blockers out of your way. And what happens is you create a very, very loyal following and a very loyal team. And that loyalty becomes known. It becomes an attraction for recruiting purposes. It becomes helpful for retention. And some people who leave end up coming back. And for you in your career, you might eventually move on as well. Those people will follow you to wherever you go next. And that was one of the keys of how I built my career. Every time I left and went somewhere else, I had a couple of people who'd come with me. So I had people who knew me and my playbook and my system every single time to help me get started, which was a big, big help. So spend time with your people every day, understand who they are, what they're going through, not just professionally, but personally. Try to be there to support and help solve, some of the challenges and just remove shit out of their way that is slowing them down all day, every day. That's what you should do, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
And, thank you for speaking and coming here today as well. It's nice.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
Nice to hear your voice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice question. Thank you. Who's next? Come on up. Sure, you can.
So I know a lot of what you've spoken about is about outbounding, but I just want to ask, in case you did inbound also, do you have a mindset change when you go from one to the other? Do you have different thoughts between outbounding versus inbounding, or what you're more successful at and why?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked this question, because this is something that I think a lot of sales orgs and salespeople get wrong. And Chris mentioned my LinkedIn feed. I think it was like 2 days ago, I wrote something to the effect of inbound interest is not the same as purchasing intent. And this is something that people screw up all the time. you become an inbound person and you assume that people already know they have a problem, already know why it's important to fix, have urgency behind it, and therefore you skip straight away to just talking about your product and your solution. Whereas if you were outbounding, you're taking more time to find pain and build value and whatnot. So for me, the best thing I can do on inbound is follow the same kind of mindset, is slow down a little bit. Don't just go right to your product pitch. Ask questions, find out why they came to you, why they're here, get them to admit they have this problem, make sure they understand why it's important, figure out a timeline of when they're looking to, do something about this, and then deliver. So the approach is the same to me. And all of my orgs that I've built and advised, I preach this over and over, and so many people get it wrong, and it's super frustrating to see people get it wrong. Your pitch and everything obviously changes, and so you'd have an outbound kind of sales playbook. If I'm Michael, for example, I have an outbound sales playbook and I have an inbound sales playbook. The mindset and methodology is pretty similar, but the actual words that I'm using are different, right? And so I skin the script a little differently. I might skin the demo a little differently. The objections, if you will, and the questions that we face might be a little different. So I just prep for those things, and then we execute it, Hopefully I answer your question.
Thank you. All right, come on up.
Big boss.
So just going back to kind of the same thing with inbound, outbound, BDR, self-sourcing. Ever since predictable revenue came out, everybody started segmenting their teams. BDRs doing all of the outbounding, closing reps, getting fed those leads from the BDRs, so not self-sourcing business on their own. I know you've been a big proponent of executives going from soup to nuts, and you're not saying that you shouldn't have a BDR team, but you are saying that the AE should be sourcing and hunting and killing their own business. Why do you believe so strongly in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. For one, I'm a control freak. And most really good salespeople and sales leaders, I believe, are also control freaks. And my man in the orange shirt over here is nodding his head. So I know he's a control freak as well. So it is terrifying to me to think that my entire book of business is going to come from somebody else, because I can't relinquish all of that control. So I don't want to just sit around on my hands and wait to be fed by somebody else, by my BDR, by my marketing team. I can't do that. I need to be building my own pipeline every single day. And my mindset is these other things are icing on the cake. The BDR leads are icing. The marketing leads are icing. I'm going to build my own pipeline. Second piece is I don't believe in the standard 3-to-1 pipeline to quota ratio that everybody preaches. That's too nerve-wracking for me. As an athlete, I've learned a long time ago that when you get a lead on somebody, you don't take your foot off the gas. You go in harder and you put them out of their misery, and you try to blow somebody out. So I apply that same kind of thinking to my pipeline. So I thought, okay, well, if my BDR is going to give me a 3x pipeline to quota ratio, if I can build 2x, 3x, 4x on my own, now I've got a 6 or 7x pipeline to quota ratio. I'm going to trip and fall into my number, or I'm going to hit all these accelerators if they're out there. So to make it easier on myself and less stressful at the end of every month or quarter, I'm building my own book of business. I also think you've got to do it in order to stay sharp and keep your skill set fresh and not get lazy and fat and happy and entitled. There's a huge problem in sales right now where AEs are just entitled and they're just like, oh, I don't do anything except run demos. Well, you're not, to me, like you're not really a salesperson if you're not prospecting on your own at all. And the hardest job in sales right now is that of the BDR, not the AE. It's not even close. Running demos is easy. Calling people out of the blue and trying to generate interest and build appointments is fucking hard. And any AE who says differently, well, then they should switch roles real quick. And you watch how reluctant they are to go back and do that. So I don't want to breed entitlement in my organization. I want equality and understanding between the roles. It's the same reason that I slowly allow BDRs to start running their own demos and close deals. I never did AE SDR models. As Michael alluded to, I've been proponent and always have been of full cycle sales reps, soup to nuts, entire time. I believed it and did it before Aaron Ross. I believed it and did it during Aaron Ross, and I believe it and preach it after Aaron Ross and predictable revenue.
Hold on, Scott. Hold on just a second. Oh, is it?
I don't know if he's going to.
Sorry about that. It's still
What
on.
Did my microphone go out?
Oh, you're back. There you go.
I'm back? Yeah. Okay. So I believe in
Let's see technology.
Scott, can you try speaking?
yeah. Hopefully.
Oh, okay, you're back now. Sorry about that.
Okay. So I'm like scared to talk now because it's going to short out again. Yeah. So I believe in the full cycle model. And I think, people read predictable revenue and thought it applied to every organization out there. And it doesn't. Your average sales price matters a lot. It impacts the buyer experience negatively sometimes to have too many people involved in the process. It jacks up your customer acquisition cost. It also adds organizational complexity. So I've got multiple different roles. I've got to sales operations wise account for these different things. I got to have different management layers built in there. Got to have different pitches and approaches. So yeah, I could go on. I've been pretty outspoken about this, and I'm one of the few that has kind of held serve with this for as long as I have. And what's interesting is there's starting to be people to come to my side now. There's a guy named Brendan Cassidy who was the original VP of sales at LinkedIn and EchoSign, and he's now the CEO of CoSell. And he messaged me a couple weeks ago. Was like, I'm on Team Scott in this full cycle thing. Justin Michael is a sales leader on LinkedIn that is on board with the full cycle approach. So anyway, those are some of the reasons, Michael, without getting into like nitty gritty details and math behind everything. It's kind of why I believe it. There's a time and a place for it, but I think a lot of sales organizations misapply it. And that's kind of why.
Nice, thank you. All right, who else?
I'll do another.
KG has one after you too. So, here with the
Don't
microphone, yeah.
touch the microphone. All right. So you did also just recently post about pacing on LinkedIn, which I thought was interesting. And I get the concept behind it. It's very straightforward, very simple. But Scott, you're missing the fact that everybody closes more business at the end of the month. And, it's not just like what percentage of the month you're in and where you should be at. So how do you alleviate or coach to avoid those end of month pushes or end of quarter pushes that seem to be so common?
Yeah. Well, I'm not missing that fact, Michael. I'm raging against that, So I'm actually a big proponent of this because it actually works to drum up more urgency in me as a seller or as a leader. It makes me not rely on this end of month or end of quarter surge. So if I'm staring at my number and I'm at 34% to goal, I'm pacing 34% to goal, and there's like 2 weeks left, you should not feel good about that. You should move your ass to add as many new opportunities as humanly possible, and not rely on these couple that you think you have coming in at the end. And so that's part of the reason that I think this pacing metric is powerful, is that it gives everybody like a real screenshot, if you will, a real synopsis of like where you're at and where you're going to be if nothing changes. And I don't want people sitting around thinking, well, it'll change at the end of the month. That's the opposite mentality that people have in my sales org. And I preach that and hammer it home. And I think one of the reasons that it has worked is that you start to get people hitting their number earlier in the month or earlier in the quarter. It's not so much that you avoid this, like all of our deals come in the last week type of thing. You just are scooting up the timeline of other deals to close. And so rather than people going from 34 to 100 in the last week, they might go from like 80 to 120 in the last week. And all of these things are super important as a sales leader. I don't know about you, Michael, but it is very painful as a sales leader to go into a board meeting or an executive meeting with 1 week to go and try to say, well, I know we're pacing 25% to goal, but it's the last week of the month, and I promise you we're going to hit our number. That is absolute hell. That is responsible for all this gray hair you see in the side of my beard and the lack of hair you see underneath my hat. All right, so I don't want to live like that. It's too much. So I try to stick that number out there that's like, listen, stop. You can't rely on the end of the month. You can't rely on these 3 people who told you yes. You need 10 of those. You got to go get more. You got to go get more. And so I want people to have that fire under their seat. And so that's why. And it's not just applying to the revenue number or the logo number. The same pacing metric I use for pipeline creation, opportunity creation, the number of like calls per day people are making, if that's a metric that matters, the number of emails, number of connections, any number of touch points, whatever, right? And I manage each particular person in each particular team or business unit differently based on what the numbers look like and need to look like for them. So I would know Michael's numbers and say, listen, on average, you make 45 calls a day and you're hitting like 85% quota. If we can get you to make 60 calls a day instead of this, you're going to get to your number. It's just different ways to have conversation. All those conversations are designed to get my team to move their ass and not sit on their hands and wait till the last week of the month.
Nice.
But to be clear, Michael, every sales leader on planet Earth has this challenge of people sandbagging all their deals till the last week of the quarter or the last week of the month or whatever. And if any of us could solve it perfectly, we'd all be fucking billionaires and be in our own island somewhere, and we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. That's how big of a challenge it is. And I by no means have it mastered, but that's why I did it.
It's Mike's forbidden word, sandbagging.
That's a dirty word in sales leadership.
Edie, come on up. A guy in an orange shirt approaches.
Well, first of all, thanks for being here for us today.
You're welcome.
One of the questions I have is, okay, for us, we're finding that pain point. We are creating value. We are creating that urgency and then providing a solution. However, at the end of all of this, we talked about this yesterday, of course, people buy people, and I'm a part of this, and this is the experience that you have. But at the end of the day, there's, say, 3 or 4 other competitors that all do the same thing as us. So is there anything that you would say that the buyers would look at or something that we could do to create that urgency to buy from us instead of the competitor that can do the same things that we can.
Yeah. What I'm hearing you say is, it's actually a struggle to differentiate yourselves from the competitors. So it's not so much urgency is what I'm hearing. It's more of a differentiator. So in my orgs, I build out what I call a competitive landscape kind of document. And so I list out all the competitors and then all the areas where they're superior to us and then all the areas that they're inferior to us. So like reasons why somebody might go with a competitor versus us, reasons why somebody should choose us instead of the competitor. So the moment I hear somebody say, well, we're also considering XYZ companies, or the moment I hear somebody say, well, we're currently using company X, I go straight to this document and I know exactly where to hammer. I know where we're better, right? So unless we're like completely commoditized and literally like feature for feature, everything is the same. In that case, I'm not exactly sure what you would do. If you're not commoditized like that, which I don't think you are, you really got to find ways to highlight how you're different, where you're better, why somebody chooses you. So it can be price, but that's a real weak one, to be honest with you. It can be service, but that one's weak to me because everybody says we got the best service. Unless you have tangible like things you can point to, right? Like you get a call, every single day from your account manager to check in on you. Unless you have tangible things there, the service one is kind of weak. So and to me, it has to be something in the product, something that the product does or delivers that is different than what my competitors do. And I don't know enough about your industry or product to know if you have these things, but I do know enough that if you don't, if I'm Michael, I am hammering my product team and engineering team to deliver these things. And one of your jobs as sellers is to find out what your customers need and want, right? So somebody tells me, well, we use such and such company. I'm like, well, what's your experience been like over there? Like, what are the things you love? What are the things that drive you nuts? That's a great way to get information. I have that conversation 15, 20 times a day, 20 times a week. I learn a lot. I take that information, I give it to my VP source, keeps all this stuff. You come tell me, hey, everybody likes this particular thing and the competitor 25, 30 times. Michael can now tell a story that says, I got 25 logos blocked because we can't do this. Those logos account for X number of dollars in pipeline. We're losing this amount of money every single month, every single quarter because we can't provide that. So the sales team, in a sense, takes information from the prospects and funnels it up to the product team. So you have to build out these kind of these product differentiators. So you got to lean into that. That's how you got to do it. So whether you're doing that already, I don't know. If you're not doing it, it could be a long process to get that underway, but that is what you should be doing. And so that's where I go. It's not so much about urgency to me. It's about telling a compelling story of why people choose to work with us instead of these other people, and why people have left said competitors and come to us.
All right, it looks like we've got another 3 minutes left. Should we take another question to finish it out, Scott?
Yeah, I'm here. Let's do it.
Who's up? Otherwise, I have one. So I'll go. I guess this is related to what your comments just now. I think that post-mortems, although they're not fun, I think they could be helpful to uncover some gaps in our product offering. How do you handle losing deals, and how do you talk about it after the fact?
Well, I need to understand why and keep really good data on why we lost the deal. So I don't know what terminology you all use, but we would have a close lost in our CRM, and then we'd have these reason codes, this pick list of reason codes. Could be price, could be features, could be you haven't been around long enough, whatever the reasoning codes are. And then I'm able to run the report and, like I said, figure out how many deals, who those deals are, how much revenue is attached to those deals. And I'm surfacing that from the entire organization. So that's how I gather it. But I'm teaching my team to not, how do I phrase this? I don't love the term post-mortem because I want my team to be asking those questions while the opportunity is live, while it's live still. That's where I feel like I get better information. And if I get that information while the opportunity is alive, it doesn't sting me as much. And the most important thing as a salesperson, in my opinion, is your self-confidence and your self-esteem. So if I've lost a deal and I run a post-mortem and I'm like, can you please explain why you broke up with me? I feel like I'm just getting kicked upside the head. That's not the moment for me to hear that information. The moment for me to hear the information is way earlier. Like, why have your relationships gone south in the past? What do you like in a partner? What do you not like in a partner? That is information I could do something with. So that's why I ask sooner and earlier on. And, you know, it also gives you a better sense of what's real and what's false in your pipeline, right? You know, if somebody talks about particular features that they love with your competitors and you know you don't have those features, like that deal is probably not going to close until you get those things. So it gets rid of a lot of false positives in your pipeline. And as a sales leader, I think that's important. As a sales rep, it's important to know that so you don't, you know, get overconfident that you got enough stuff in there. Yeah, that's how I answer that.
Nice, that was good, thank you. Yeah, it's a little morbid, post-mortem. All right, well, I want to finish on a positive note, so I guess, put you on the spot here. Do you have some closing comments for us?
Closing comments. I didn't have a post-game speech planned. No, I think if you leave with nothing else, I hope there's two things, I guess, that you walk away with thinking about. Number one is that sales process that I was talking about of find pain, build value, create urgency, discuss solution. You got to do it in that order. Don't skip steps. If you do that more often than you have been, you're going to win more deals. And the last thing that I'd say is, you know, a little heavier, a little deeper. It's just, we really do have a limited number of opportunity, you know, in our life and in our career. If you think about your average stint, maybe being, call it 3 or 4 years, and you're going to try to retire in your 60s, let's say, you really only have like 10 at-bats. That's it. You really only might work at like 10 places. So why would you squander one of those 10 opportunities? Why would you waste your time half-assing it, not giving it your all, not trying to learn, not trying to grow? And, you know, for those of us who are old, you realize how expensive life gets. For those of you who are young, you might not know it yet, but life gets real expensive real fast. Right. So, you know, your 65 grand that you can live on right now doesn't barely pay the rent when you're an old man like me. So, you know, don't squander it, make the most out of it. I have no special background, no special training, you know, that made me a good salesperson or a good sales leader. I think I just cared a lot more than a lot of my, you know, colleagues. And so don't squander the opportunity. Put everything you can into it. And, you know, when there's nothing left to get from it, then it's okay to move on to the next thing, to keep growing. How's that for a post-game speech?
That's fabulous. Real pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Oh.
I lost the mic for a second. I couldn't hear you, Christina.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh,
You're back.
all right. I said it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate
Oh,
it.
thank you. Thank you
Expect,
all.
expect some new LinkedIn followers.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I love that. Everybody send me a message so I can reply back.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
All right, guys, what is on the agenda next? Give me
Brief
just a
break.
second. Okay, break.
Bio break.
And
It'll be myself and then Eric.
perfect. All right, let's be back
We
at
haven't
the
read
top of the
case
hour.
study. Speed reader.
Yeah, it's a California. Thanks.
You should stop the session.
I know. Yeah, yeah.
But I was just.